it's Presley at ActOutGames.com here, and today we are going to be talking about the science of the Gravitron, which is a toy that we made at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry.
Cool. Okay. Okay, yeah, so like Presley said, and maybe you saw on the vlog a couple of days ago, we were at the Museum of Science and Industry, and we went back and they had this little like toy maker exhibit, and it turned out to be super cool. It was a whole like assembly line where they made these little Gravitrons. That were gyroscopic tops.
Gracie said they look kind of like Beyblades, which they do.
They do like Beyblades. They totally do. And luckily, we were there with Gracie and her dad knows all about the assembly mechanisms that put these things together, so he walked us through and we went step by step, and some of that was in the vlog a couple of days ago. I'll cut in a little bit here on the next, here now actually, so you can see a little bit of what we were talking about, how we got to watch them be made, and what was interesting about how we watched these things be made.
Well, there were quite a few interesting things, like how the robots moved. But I would say one of the most interesting things, there was this turning machine. Yeah. And there were little caps, which I believe were like these things. Yeah. And there were several that were upside down, but when they fell, they turned right side up, even though the right side up ones didn't turn upside down, they went down there. Yeah, they had like a little part sorter, there was a little shake sorter, and as the pieces came down, if they were upside down, they would flip over. But if they were right side up, they would stay normal, right? So we made sure that everything was right side up by the time it got to the machine that was going to pick them and put them where they were supposed to go. It's pretty cool, and just really simple designs. And so this video we're doing today about these things is going to be maybe a little rambly. But it's also going to be a little bit about our homeschooling. People ask us all the time about our homeschooling, and we do a lot of things that you would call unit studies. So we find one thing that's kind of interesting, and then we talk about a lot of different aspects of it, right? Talk about a lot of different things that have to do with it. So this guy, we're going to talk a little bit about how they were made, and the Industrial Revolution, and the assembly line, and we're going to talk a little bit about the physics behind them. So we're going to talk about physics as well. So we're going to cover a few different homeschool topics, all centered around just going to the museum and seeing this little thing get made, right? So what did you learn about, so what we saw was an automated assembly line, right? So there were no people that were working on these things. It was all robots. They just kind of went in their little carts and moved along, and at each station something new got added, and then it got wrapped up in a package, and your name even got etched in it. Oh, this one's my little brother's. Yeah, this one's Cooper's, and that one's yours, so it's actually got your name. And I think I have a green one. I'll try and get a good shot. Yeah, there's another one somewhere. I have a green one somewhere, and apparently whoever made this was called System. Like seriously, there's a green one that just says System. I'll try and get a shot. It's kind of hard to see the names, but I'll try and get a good shot of that so you can see what's etched on there. But so that was a fully automated assembly line with a bunch of robots building these. You went to a computer and you typed in your name and what color you wanted, and you hit go, and then it just moved along and it made these out, right? So what did you learn about the assembly line today while you were doing your studies about the assembly line? Well, first we saw some of the assembly line being made, and we learned that the assembly lines don't have different kinds of hands for different jobs. And there's this really big one which actually has a hand which has a like a thrill park ride, like a little like those seats that you have on roller coasters and stuff, and then it would kind of fling it around. And that robot hand, if you put a different hand on it, could do something completely different. Like it could pick things up and put it over here. But since it has the right hand, it throws it around. So that was the robots on the assembly lines. Yeah. What about the assembly line in general, like before the robots? The assembly line in general, what we learned. Where did that come from? The assembly line, well. And what is an assembly line? What does that even mean? An assembly line is a line of people. So, say you're making one of these Gravitrons. One person would say they would get this piece, they would pass on this piece to the next person would stick on this bottom piece, the next person would put this clear piece, the next person would put this top piece, the next person would etch in the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry, and as well as etch the name and the date, and then the next person would package it up. Yeah, that's right. So it's everybody, it's a series. So like what would have happened before the assembly line
is one person would have done everything,
Yeah.
right? So they would have all of the parts that they needed and all the tools that they needed, and they would have done one piece and then moved on and done the next piece and gotten the tool to do the next piece, and they would have eventually they ended up with a Gravitron and they put it all together, right?
But then came along the assembly line, which got it done a bit faster. Because,
a lot faster.
Yeah, because one person just had to get good and quick at doing one thing. So, and it helped speed up what
all I'm going to do is the bumper. And so the other thing that happened, so a couple of things happened there, right? So you just had to focus on one thing. So if you were doing a lot, your tools would be really spread out, right? And the pieces you would need would be really spread out. So after I did this, I would have to go get this other tool and do this. But if I'm just doing one piece, everything I need is just right here. So the one thing that they focused on was minimizing movement even. So I only have to grab this thing and put it here and then move the part along, right? And then the part would go on, like it started out with like gravity slides. Like I would be kind of higher up than the next person in the chain. And so when I put this on the slide, it would go down the slide to the next person. So like gravity would just carry this to the next station, and that person would pick it up and they would have their little piece, and they would just have to move this much and put it there, and it would slide down to the next person. And so everybody's just moving a tiny amount and really quickly, and then gravity is carrying it along, right? And then what came next?
Well, real quick, I want to talk about something. The assembly line also probably sped up like mass production, because
very much so.
One person would just have to do this and then pass along, and then would get another one do this. Whereas when you didn't have an assembly line, you would have to make one, then make another one, then make another
and the other thing, like you would have
time.
to wait. So like while I'm putting on the metal ring in here that we'll talk about in a second, I got to do that first, and however long that takes, then I move to the next step and I put on the top piece or the bumper, and then I move on to the next piece and I etch the thing in. Whereas with an assembly line, while I'm putting the metal ring in, the next guy is putting the top on the next one, and the next guy is etching the next one. So we're all working at the same time, so it goes a whole lot faster. I mean, it's amazing how much faster it goes, right? And then what did we talk about this morning about how the Industrial Revolution, which the assembly line was a part of the Industrial Revolution, there were other parts, but what did we talk about how the Industrial Revolution was like the Agricultural Revolution? Well,
the Industrial Revolution was like the Agricultural Revolution. That's gonna go on Google Reel. So the Industrial Revolution is a lot like the Agricultural Revolution. That's really, really hard to say.
It's okay.
Because in the Agricultural Revolution, everyone figured out about farming, so like one person could farm and feed 7 other people.
Yeah.
So those 7 other people could have free time to go do other jobs. Like one person could become a writer and write down, and like maybe they could write down like maybe Greek myths or whatever
exactly right.
they were believing in, and one person could be an artist, so they could draw. Like this was a huge change. Like if the Egyptians were, if any historical person, if the Agricultural Revolution never happened, then we would know nothing about anything, because everyone was spending time getting food for themselves so they don't starve. But once the one farmer could produce food for the whole town, the other people could start writing down stuff about what happened.
Do other jobs, build houses.
Yep. And then we could and then we would know a lot more about everything else. Like we could know a lot more about history, because if that never happened, history would be nothing.
We'd still be trying to eat.
Yep. There would be no one to write anything.
Right.
So we wouldn't know anything about like the past 3 billion years.
And so how does that relate to the Industrial Revolution?
Well, in the Industrial Revolution, it did the exact same thing. It got more people to do more different jobs, because there are all these robots that would replace people, and it slowly made it so a whole factory would just have a few people making sure the robots worked okay. So it slowly got rid of the jobs building things, so there would be more jobs freed up to again write and make things, and perhaps even make things that robots can't make, like
do non-manufacturing kind of jobs.
Do different kinds of jobs.
And so even before the robots, like I mean, that's obviously a thing, right? The robots came in and replaced people on the assembly line, so people didn't have to do it.
That happened in Willy Wonka.
They did happen to Willy Wonka. Even before that, it was just more efficient, so fewer people could make more things. Just the same way that fewer people could make more food when they started farming, fewer people could make more goods, and so the other people could go do other things. So it was another similar type of revolution that led to people being being able to turn these, fewer people being able to make Gravitrons. Or cars is always the big example, right? Henry Ford gets a lot of credit. He didn't invent the assembly line. He gets a lot of credit for it. They sort of came through other places, but he really, the automation of it and the machines and the conveyor belts carrying things along, Henry Ford really drove a lot of that forward, right? The guy that makes Ford cars.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's obvious. I mean, he doesn't make Toyota.
Right. That's where it all kind of, he gets a lot of the credit for modernizing the assembly line. The assembly line sort of existed prior to that. And there's actually a really funny Big Bang Theory episode where Penny is making these little hair clips called Penny Blossoms, and Sheldon comes over and like makes her more efficient by turning it into assembly line. They sing a little song, each one kind of puts a little dab of glue, and the next person puts the little bead on there and stuff. It's really funny. So I'll have to track that down and watch it.
DIY assembly lines. I'm officially doing that with my friends now. Like, I have a big DIY.
Yeah,
like, friends come over, we make assembly.
So that's a big part of history, is the Industrial Revolution and how something like the assembly line, with even the non-automated assembly line, really improved production. And then it came along, and now robots. Like, you watched the thing on how it works the other day, where it was saying like 160 robots are making like 200 cars a day or something like that. Right?
It's I think 650 robots were making 900 cars a day.
That's crazy, right? So yeah, so they're turning on. There's not even, like you said, there's people that are making sure the robots are working, but there's not people sort of building the things anymore. It's all automated, right? So that was an interesting part of what we were going to do. And we want to spend a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about the physics behind these things. Because
the physics behind this is not a toy that immediately makes the Industrial Revolution happen. It's a toy that does this. Whoa. That's a loud noise.
It is a loud noise. Alright, so look, yours is spinning and it's standing up. Mine's not spinning. If I let go of it, it falls over. Like, that's the physics. What's happening?
Well, there's quite a few things happening during this. So the main thing that's happening, there's a metal ring in here, and it's spinning around.
That's right.
So it makes it really weird to hold this.
It does.
And as you can see, it has
angular momentum.
Yes, it has angular momentum, and angular momentum is inertia, except it's spinning.
That's right.
It doesn't want to go in a straight line. It wants to keep spinning.
That's right.
And because it wants to keep spinning, it doesn't want to fall over and stop spinning.
Yeah. So inertia
it constantly wants to keip spinning and not fall down.
Yeah. So inertia says like something. It's Newton's laws, right? What are Newton's 3 laws?
Newton's 3 laws.
Pop quiz. What are Newton's 3 laws?
Yeah, pop quiz.
They don't have to be in order. Just tell me what they are.
Okay. So one is every action has to have an equal and opposite reaction.
That's right.
And then there's inertia, which is the...
What does inertia mean?
Inertia means an object in motion an object in motion wants to stay in motion until an outside force has acted on it, and an object in rest wants to stay at rest until an outside force has acted on it.
Perfect. What's the third one?
And the third one, well, the third one doesn't really sound like a law, basically, but it is one of Newton's laws, and that is thinking of the wrong thing. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking of the wrong thing. Okay. And that is force equals mass time acceleration, or F equals ma.
Perfect.
Which is actually something that I've completely memorized, like F equals ma. I can put this in basically any situation. In fact, I've put it in a situation of going to Lowe's and pushing around a shopping cart.
Right.
That's
a handy one, right? Okay, so inertia is anything like something moving. If you push something in a straight line, it's going to keep going in a straight line until something stops it, right? So there's a similar thing with rotational inertia or angular momentum, right?
Momentum
so
equals inertia, by the way.
If you spin something, if something is spinning, it wants to do the same thing. It wants to keep spinning unless something acts on it. Not only does it want to keep spinning, it wants to keep spinning in the same plane. So even turning it and tilting it in a different way, it resists that. It doesn't want to do that, right? And so if you have like a good example is a satellite, like a satellite out in outer space that's spinning, it doesn't have to have like rocket motors to keep it spinning. It'll just spin. It just keeps going and keeps going because there's no friction up there to slow it down. Another really good example is the Earth. The Earth is rotating, right? That's how we get day and night.
But we don't have any motors.
But yeah, there's no motors on the Earth spinning it around, right? It's just spinning because there's not a lot of friction. There's almost no friction, and so it just keeps spinning, right?
Also, speaking of Newton's laws...
That's angular momentum.
Speaking of Newton's laws, if you know those, you basically know all of physics.
It helps. It covers a lot of stuff, right? And so what's happening here is you're exactly right. There's this little metal ring in here, and the metal ring starts spinning, and that creates angular momentum, and so it resists a change.
And it's still spinning, wow.
It wants to keep spinning, and it doesn't want to tilt either way, and so when you stand it up, it doesn't want to fall over. It resists just falling over, right? And even like you did just a second ago, you can do, hold on a second, let me do this.
I will do it.
If you spin it like this, it'll even stand up this way.
Yep. Oh,
it wants to hop
really
around.
Loud,
but see, it won't fall over. Stand yours up without spinning, like this.
Like this, yeah.
So see, that'll fall over because it doesn't have any angular momentum.
Yep.
But this one won't. There's another really cool thing that happens here that's probably bigger than what we'll talk about, but there's a concept called gyroscopic precession.
Gyroscopic.
Which we did a video on a while back, and it's one of my favorite things in physics. But what it says is if you have a spinning disc like this, and you apply force to it, so if I were to push down here, that force would actually manifest 90 degrees off of center. So if I push down here, it actually turns this way, right? And if I push up here, it actually comes up over here. And so a good way to show that, here's trying to stop yours for a second so it doesn't make too much noise. Put this back in the little thing and it'll rub up against it and stop it.
Yeah, let's create more friction. Okay, we created friction and stops.
Right. All right, so watch this. So to show that gyroscopic precession, if I get it spinning like this, what's going to happen is I'm going to push down right here, which puts a force, this way. It's trying to make it tilt over that way. But because of gyroscopic precession, that force is actually going to happen over here. And so instead of tipping over, it's going to turn. You ready? Watch. So when I push down, it actually turns instead of dipping down. And the cool thing that you can do with that shows there's this little, I've just got a little string here. Watch this. Let me see yours for a second without spinning.
Here. Okay, I'll turn mine.
Without spinning? I'll do it spinning.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things that you can do with that is it's spinning.
Gosh, I just put it in. Oh god.
Well, you can't. You put it in, pull it out. When you pull it out, start spinning again.
This is.
Okay, so
it stops spinning now.
Without it spinning, I can hang this little rope on this, just the little knob out here. You can see how far off balanced it is. All the weight is hanging off to the side there. Get it on there. And so if I let go of this, what's going to happen?
It's going to fall onto the table.
It's just going to drop right out, right?
We're not going to let it fall on the table, so I make a lot of noise.
But like we just talked about gyroscopic precession. So if I've got it spinning and I'm creating angular momentum, then what's going to happen when I have it hanging here? It's going to try, the force is pushing this way, right? But because of gyroscopic precession, it's going to apply over here and actually turn that way. And so instead of falling, it's going to turn around in a circle, right?
Here's the zippy thing. These zippy things.
So, let's see if I can get it hooked up. Ready? So that's why it's spinning in a circle. It's because it's trying to fall over. Force is being applied that direction, but because of gyroscopic precession, it applies 90 degrees away from where the force is actually being applied, and it makes it spin in a circle until it slows down enough that it actually drops and falls off. That's one of the craziest things in all of physics as far as I'm concerned. And again, it's sort of outside of the scope of what we're really going to talk about today, but I wanted to show it because it's a really cool experiment. And people show that all the time, the top like hanging and spinning. You can do it with a bicycle tire. You see these experiments all over the place, and it's a really cool.
These are really good because they're basically tops.
Yeah, they're all gyroscopes, right? They show some really amazing concepts, right? The last thing I kind of want to talk about from a physics standpoint is if you look in here and you saw when it was put together, the weight is in this metal ring, right? And there's a reason that it's a metal ring or the weight is all on the outside rather than like a disc where it's solid and the weight's kind of distributed all over the place, because the amount of angular momentum or the amount how much it resists changing and tipping over and falling is based on how big, like the radius of the spinning circle, like how big the thing that's spinning is, and how far out, like the shape of the thing, how far out the weight is from the center. And so something like this, a ring, where the weight is far out from the center, it's harder to get it to start spinning, but it's also, that means it's harder for it to stop spinning. It'll spin longer. So if you had a disc, or if you had all the weight in the middle, then it would spin really fast. It would spin a whole lot faster, and when you pulled the thing, it would spin a lot faster, but it wouldn't spin as long, and it would be easier to tip over because it wouldn't have as much angular momentum, because having the weight out further from the center, it spins slower, but it has more angular momentum. Yeah, go ahead.
Just like some tops I've seen, like when my friends has one, and it has most of the weight in the middle because you have to press down on something to get it spinning. So it starts spinning really, really fast, but then like 5 seconds later it
slows or falls over. That's right. You could push it over more easily. The other way that you see that a lot, the famous example of that, like angular momentum and conservation of angular momentum, is figure skaters. We talked about this the other day, right? So if a figure skater has their arms out and they spin, they go slower. They're a lot more stable. They're less likely to fall over. That's another reason. That's too why, like when you're walking on a tightrope or something, you hold your arms out, or people hold those long poles because it has a lot of angular momentum and it doesn't want to tip side to side, right? So that gives you a little bit more stability. But like a figure skater will hold their arms out and they'll spin, and they'll start spinning and they'll be really stable. And then what happens when they pull their arms into the center?
They'll go a lot faster.
They go a lot faster because they pull the mass into the middle, so they spin faster. They're less stable, so they can kind of tip over and fall. They're not as stable as they were, but they'll go faster. So that's conservation of angular momentum.
I also do that because I'm just randomly spinning around the living room, and then I have my arms out, and then I'm just tuck them in. And I'm like,
Those are really good. I don't know if we have a chair. We'll have to look around. Maybe this chair that I'm in will do it, but you need a good chair that spins really good, and you can take like 2 little weights and hold them in your arms. And so I'll put you in this chair and you can hold the weights out and I'll get you spinning around, and you spin for a couple of seconds and then you pull the weights into your chest and see how much faster you go. It's a really cool experiment. So that's why it's made as a ring around the outside, because it's more stable if the weight is out to the outside. And there's a reason for that we'll go into the math later. There's no reason to sort of do it on the vlog, but we'll go into the math of why having the weight in a ring is better for this purpose than having the weight in a disc, right? Or in a flywheel in a car like you use. So the other thing, like, it stores energy, and you can think of something rotating like that as having a bunch of stored energy that then you could apply to use somewhere else. Like, you just build up that angular momentum and then you could apply it somewhere else. Like you see here, one of the interesting things, because there's friction, when this disc spin, it actually rubs against the plastic, right? It's not, it's got a good bearing on it, so it doesn't rub too much, but it rubs a little bit. So one of the things that you'll notice when you turn it on your side, that friction starts impacting here and it makes it roll, right? So you're turning the angular momentum into motion because it's the friction of that spinning disc or that spinning ring inside rubs against this plastic disc and gets the whole thing to start turning. So you can actually make it do work for you. You can store that energy up and use it to do something else, right? That's a pretty cool little experiment. But yeah, just a little, like one of the little gyroscopes that you can get in little toy shops and stuff, or a little top Gravitron like this. There's a ton of experiments that you can do. Here, I'll show you one other really cool one that just to kind of play around with this. So, and you sort of mentioned this before, but take this one that's not really spinning and just turn it over, spin it around in your hand. Yeah, just feel what it feels like to turn it over. Turn it upside down, turn it the other way, and then I'll spin this one and do the same thing with that one while it's spinning.
Oh god,
it feels weird, doesn't it? It's not, because not only is it resisting change, like it doesn't want to change.
Gyroscopic?
But gyroscopic precession means that when you turn it this way, it actually tries to turn that way. And so you're having to fight. It's not behaving the way you think it should. When I flip it over, I want to flip it over like that, but it tries to turn like that because of gyroscopic precession. So it just feels weird in your hand. Yeah. So they're a ton of fun to play with. But yeah, so that's just a little example of some of the things you can take and learn. Yeah, go ahead.
If I put it on my finger, I yanked my finger away, but if you put it on your finger, which I cannot do because I'm really clumsy, but
it's slowing down. Here, I'll spin one.
But mine's slowing down. Okay, you do it with your finger because yeah, the first few seconds you go.
Oh. So it'll do the same thing, and you can actually, because of the resistance to change, one of the things you don't do a lot is watch this. You can actually tilt it on your finger too. It'll keep that tilt.
It sounds like a screaming goat.
Once it starts spinning the plastic, it doesn't work as well. Okay, shut them down.
Yeah, okay. An easy way to shut them down is to put this in place.
So don't do that, because when you pull it back out, it stops.
Yeah, put it facing the wrong way.
Yeah, you just stop it. Push it through. Okay, cool. So that's a good example of, in general, how our homeschooling works, I think, right? You just take something a little interesting, trip that we made, and we pick these little things up.
Or Assassin's Creed.
Or Assassin's Creed. We can learn about the French Revolution, which we're doing now.
Yeah, Pirates.
Pirates. We learned about Bernoulli's Principle by playing the old Assassin's Creed. But yeah, you take something like this and you think about all the different ways, all the different lessons you can learn from this. The Industrial Revolution, the assembly line, the automated assembly line, gyroscopic precession, angular momentum. There's like all kinds of things you can dig into, and you just have these little conversations about how these things work. And then we're going to break up and do some math about figuring out how to calculate the differences. It helps you with seesaw If you want to get on a seesaw with your friend and your friend weighs more than you, where do you have to each sit? You can do easy math to kind of figure that kind of stuff out, and that's all angular momentum.
That would be really, really helpful because almost all of my friends, except a friend that's 3 years younger than me, are heavier than me. So when I want to go on a seesaw, I probably have to have my friend that's 3 years younger than me with me and another friend, and it wouldn't work too well.
There's simple math to figure out how much torque is necessary and moments and where to put things on those. It's really easy. I'll show you that. You'll like it.
I'm going to appreciate.
But yeah, so that's the kind of thing that we dig into. And when we were playing with this toy, we thought it would be an awesome time to talk a little bit about angular momentum, because you and I haven't talked about angular momentum before we got this. We talked about linear momentum or inertia, but we haven't talked about angular momentum, and this was a perfect example.
Basically, that momentum is just a fancy word for inertia.
That's right.
It's basically linear momentum equals inertia, which is, or thing going in a straight line.
Yeah. Angular momentum is thing rotating.
Fancy words.
Fancy words, that's right. But it's just a thing that's spinning, wants to keep spinning.
Yep.
That's all there is to it. And it wants to keep spinning in the same plane. It doesn't even want to tilt. It's not that it just wants to keep spinning and you can move it around. It's that it wants to keep spinning in a flat plane, or however you started spinning. Right?
Okay.
Awesome. So that's a quick little physics lesson and history lesson on the Industrial Revolution based on a little plastic toy that we made with Gracie and her dad in Chicago.
Plastic toy equals science.
That's right.
Well, basically everything equals science, so.
That's right. Everything equals science. That's a good way to wrap up. Okay, John, anything right there?
Thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!
Bye, guys.